Welcome back to the Echoes podcast. I'm Jessica Smetana. He's Golic Jr. We're recording this Monday, January 19th, before the national championship game. So if you're listening to this on Tuesday, congratulations to the winner, or maybe not. Maybe we're mad that you won. It depends. Heard from a lot of Notre Dame fans last week that are also Indiana fans, Mike, which I thought was kind of interesting. I guess there's a little bit of a crossover there that I wasn't really expecting.
Well, I saw some people, and thank you as always to the people that comment on our YouTube channel. Go and subscribe there, like Jess mentioned, on the social media comment sections as well. A lot of people pointed out, and I think this is interesting, that some Indiana fans or Indiana grads who had gone through their whole lives with them being a bad football team had just taken the in-state out of Notre Dame is the popular historically football school in the state. And so they would just root for Notre Dame. And now that Indiana, their either alma mater or they're connected to is good, they're just like, oh, we'll go back and do this. So very interesting to see some of that Venn diagram crossover for sure.
Yeah. So wish I knew which group of those people was feeling good when they're listening to this. But the best news is if you're unhappy about the national championship game, we're not going to talk about it all in this episode. We're going to talk about Marcus Freeman finally giving us some FaceTime. He did a press conference last week. We're going to talk about that and some of our takeaways from it. We're going to talk about the most recent transfer portal addition since our last episode last week. And then we have some more big picture thoughts on how the portal went and where we're heading in this offseason. So, Mike, let's start with this Marcus Freeman press conference, which was announced after we recorded our last episode. We weren't sure if we were going to hear from him before spring ball started. We didn't know if he was going to, take the Steelers job. We didn't know what was going on. Marcus Freeman got asked a lot of meaty questions, I would say. And so we have a lot to get through. But do you have one thing specifically that was your biggest takeaway from this press conference? Because I have one, and I'm curious if it's the same one.
All right. Well, my biggest one was that the NFL is still very much on the table in the future. Was that yours?
No, mine was about the undergraduate enrollment dean, vice president of undergraduate enrollment, Mickey Kidder, helping getting some underclassmen in the portal. But let's start with yours, because I think that was probably the headline.
Well, that was the headline in terms of preying on our worst fears, especially in a week where, Curt Cignetti had gotten asked similar questions and basically said, I'm not an NFL guy, I'm a college guy, like all that, and very much shut it down. Marcus Freeman was asked about, his, how he recalibrates his thought. Or, there was a million different ways that it was phrased, his immediate plans. And he said, head football coach at Notre Dame. I think Eric Hansen pressed him later on and kind of asked him about, hey, we understand the NFL's got interest in you. Do you have interest in them? And he said, I don't know. I've never done that. And then kind of gave, some vague answers about maybe down the line. He's not sure of the timeline. So all that is to say for him, in a way that we've talked about before, I completely understand. He has left the door open for something that we still do not know. He did not give us any insight on whether or not he is truly interested or not in coaching at that level. So while we didn't come away with a direct answer from him, I do think in lieu of a true concrete, no, I'm not going to the NFL, that's not something I'm interested in, we have to keep ourselves open to the idea that that's still on the table.
Okay, I interpreted it maybe a little bit less... he seemed less interested to me than maybe he seemed to you. Also, maybe I think he's too honest and I'm taking everything he says at face value, and I'm wrong because men have never lied to me before, Mike. But when the one answer that I did, this was, I think, the third time he was asked about the NFL. The one answer where I did think, A, I'm surprised he didn't have a more well-rehearsed, canned answer to this question, but B, I kind of was like, I think this is the honest answer, was the third time he was asked about it. And he said, do I want to be? I mean, I don't really, I've never done it. I don't know enough about it. And maybe sometime in the future, if it's the right time and it's what I think is right for me, then maybe I'll pursue it. I don't love wasting time thinking about things that aren't right in front of me. The reason I feel like this is honest is because that last line is quintessential Marcus Freeman. I don't love wasting time thinking about things that aren't right in front of me. That is his entire ethos as a football coach. But I think he was in a position where he can't say outright, no, I'm never going to do that. Like the difference between Curt Cignetti and Marcus Freeman is like 30 years, right? Like way different stages in their careers, just completely different things ahead of them. Both great football coaches, obviously. But I don't think he can necessarily say, I'm never going to do that, because I don't think he wants to be a liar. But I don't think he also can say, the truth, which is that like, I want to stay at Notre Dame as long as it makes sense to stay at Notre Dame. And then like one day, if I want to leave, I'll leave. Cause you obviously can never say that. Like you're in the business of recruiting like 17 to 22-year-olds to come play with you. You need to have them think that you're going to be there as long as they're going to be there. Right. So like he also like needs leverage in contract negotiations, which is why I bring up Mickey Kidder, because that seems like maybe perhaps, and this is just me speculating, that was a point of leverage in a contract negotiation where he said, hey guys, here's the thing.
Yeah.
The transfer portal has changed. College football has changed. If you want me to stick around, I need a shot. And to have a real shot at this, I need to be able to get players here that have multiple years of eligibility left that can enroll in the school and don't have to be graduate transfers or mostly graduated to get in. And so I think maybe like there's a little bit of that in that answer where like, he needs the NFL and he needs other places to be interested in him to be able to get things that help him be successful at Notre Dame.
I listen, again, that's why I've said in all this, I do not blame him for the way that he's answered questions about this, because personally, professionally, in a million ways, it's the right way to go about it. So, and you're right, I do take him at his word. Like, Marcus Freeman's a football guy. True and true. And I've always said it's my difficulties. I'm a terrible long-term planner because you come from a world where all you can control and worry about is the 5 minutes in front of your face. And Marcus has a lot on his plate in that time period. So we'll see. Yeah, the age component is absolutely the right differentiator between the two and a lot of the other names that come up in this. Marcus just turned 40 years old. He has got so much of his coaching life ahead of him, and he's a rock star. So I completely get the interest on both sides. The big win for Notre Dame fans, quite honestly, in that regard, because the calls aren't going to stop coming, and deservedly so. Marcus was right. And at your point, I do think the best part about it is that honesty, his transparency, the fact that we do believe him is also extended to the players. Like Notre Dame able to retain as much of their roster as they did while that was going on. And Marcus reemphasizing here, I am honest with our players. I keep them abreast of these situations because I don't want to put them in bad positions. Like, I think that's admirable. And I think that level of transparency is why guys really rock with Marcus Freeman, because on a lot of levels, he is honest with them. He paints a clear picture of this. And I think that's evidenced by the way that this has gone. So, and by the way, best news for Notre Dame fans, so many of the good NFL jobs are coming off the table here. Like, you're going to have a new Steelers head coach for the next 20 years. The Ravens job, the Bills job is going to be open. Like the Ravens, Bills, all these places with great quarterbacks that would be slam dunk jobs that anyone wants are going to get filled this offseason. So I don't know. I take some solace in that.
Yeah, except like maybe next year the 49ers job comes open and we're having this conversation all over. And not that I think that's going to happen, but like that's a Notre Dame connection deep NFL job that's pretty good.
I know.
But yes,
Jess, I want to talk about your point though. Like I've belabored the Notre Dame or Marcus Freeman to NFL fear long enough. Like the point you just brought up, like, and for people that maybe don't understand the background, I'm sure a lot of Notre Dame fans do, but like how atypical that is and how big a part of Notre Dame's history, this waxing and waning of the level of strict academic rigor and admissions problems that the school has had.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we talked about it a little bit last week. We're like, it's interesting that some of the players that they've gotten in this cycle have been guys that are a little bit younger and have a few years ahead of them, because it's not the sort of like one and done plug and play player that we've seen Notre Dame go for, like your Will Pauling or your Malachi Fields last year. And frankly, if you were looking at what Notre Dame needed coming into next season, you might not have even thought those players were on the table for Notre Dame to recruit and to get into school, basically. But yeah, it seems like now, based on Marcus Freeman's comments about Mickey Kidder, they have had a honest conversation about the portal. And like, I don't think as fans we should take this for granted, because there are other schools like Stanford that are similarly, academic focused, that are like, we don't want to do that. We don't want to have people come in and like, transfer in and have to figure out the credits and all of that if they're not doing the same core curriculum that like our students are doing or whatever. And that's kind of been Notre Dame's MO from my understanding about this. And it's impacted other sports too, and transfers in, basketball. And so I think that generally speaking, if the deans are unhappy, Mike, then I'm probably happy about it, because they're real sticklers. They're real sticklers. And they, I'm sort of being facetious here, but they're obviously it's something that Notre Dame really cares about. But, should a statistics class at Clemson transfer into Notre Dame, hypothetically. I mean, Clemson's a good school. Why wouldn't we count that? I don't know. Ask the arts and letters dean when I transferred into Notre Dame. For some reason, a bunch of random shit didn't count that I got A's in, and it should have. So, I don't know. I don't have an axe to grind with the deans, but
I'm not mad. Don't write in the paper that I was mad.
But I do think that was a huge takeaway from this whole thing that probably, if you're not a Notre Dame fan, fell way under the radar. You're probably thinking, you probably saw the NFL clips and were like, okay. You probably saw the USC clip and we're like, okay. You probably saw, some of the transfer stuff and we're like, okay. But I think that it's really interesting that this has happened in this cycle. And I think, we have really, we can see the direct concrete result of this on the roster going into next season when you have a player like Francis Brew, who's got a couple years left, when you have these young wide receivers that we're going to talk about who have a couple years left, you have less of a, more of a chance to develop a player and see how they do over a couple seasons versus, your Javonte John Baptiste. It's he's going to come in, be our pass rusher this year, and then he's off the following year. So very interesting, Mike. And not something I necessarily was expecting.
No, the admissions person getting name checked in the press conference, you're right, is quintessentially Notre Dame in a way that probably made everyone else's eyes glaze over and all of ours perk up because this is
it was like
so
Googling
different.
Her immediately. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, I'm gonna say everything we need to know. We got to start sending Mickey flowers. He name checked certainly, Mike Martin, the general manager, and then Mickey Kidder. So those are names you need to know. But you're right, it's a completely different talent pool you get to source from, Jess, when you're dealing with guys that have multiple. We just saw, the reason Notre Dame is the only team in the top 25 of transfer portal classes with single-digit transfers. Notre Dame took 7 transfers in the portal this year. And according to 24/7, I think I checked yesterday, they are the only team in the top 25 with single digits, but ranked 10th in the transfer and 2nd in the overall roster composition right now, is because you were able to go after more talented players who usually, if you're talking about graduate guys, a lot of those guys that are the extreme 4 and 5 star talents are guys that are probably early entrants into the NFL or guys that stuck around long enough to get that. Now they're places where Ohio State for the wide receivers, you're stuck in a room that's a continued logjam of some of the best players on planet Earth. And there's the only one ball thing. And so now these guys defecting and Notre Dame being in position to come and scoop them up does change the way that Marcus can operate going forward. It takes the cuffs off and it really helps them go and continue to play ball at the level of the contenders in the sport and the way it's got to get done now. So you're right. That's massive.
Yeah, I think it's also a little bit of a more of a high school recruiting type pitch too, where you're saying
yes.
We have Charlie Partridge here. He's someone who's very highly regarded as a guy who can develop players like you if you want to come here. And maybe you won't be ready next year. Maybe we have a few things we need to fine tune, but now you're at Notre Dame, you can get the degree, you have the, 4 for 40 or whatever, the long-term connections, the network, all those things that helps, I think, sell Notre Dame to high school players. And it's probably, I don't know if it's an easier sell, but if you're a player that's just going to transfer for 1 year, you probably just want to be on the team where you're going to start, you're going to get the best looks from NFL scouts, you're going to, if you're a wide receiver, for instance, you're going to play with the best quarterback. And I think it's a much different, you're asking, especially these wide receivers, you're buying into a few years of Notre Dame quarterbacking. You're buying into the program, not just what are you going to do next season. So, and we know Marcus Freeman's been really good at recruiting younger players. So I think that this is probably great for everyone involved. And now he can kind of get those same type of players who have, just happen to be freshmen or sophomores at other schools. And the credits will count.
Yeah. Well, Jess, that is a great point, though, about the way that Marcus is and this staff continued, and this press conference is the same. Their messaging of, we are primarily going to be a program that recruits through high school. We'll see if that changes if in 1 year they've got a massive roster outpouring at a specific position where they've got to take double-digit transfers to stay competitive the following season. But right now they want to keep building that bedrock and to do it with these guys too. The relationship of it all, the reason Notre Dame's been so good at retention is because they are so focused on recruiting guys that they believe fit this. And Keon Keeley, it's been off talked about that he was a Notre Dame commit who then decommitted and went to Alabama. But Marcus said when they picked up that conversation, it was the same kid that they left off with. With Quincy Porter, there's the Tay Johnson angle of those two being guys that knew each other and having that pre-existing relationship. Like there's all this, the Francis Brew and Partridge relationship, like all of those things that even in a day and age where I'm hesitant at times to forecast too much for multiple years with these guys because it's such a year-to-year sport. It's part of the reason that Notre Dame has done a better job than most in the roster retention that every coach says is the most difficult part of the sport. And so even in the portal version of that, I do think these connective fibers, plus, like you said, the fact that you've got CJ Carr and all these great other elements to sell, does give you a good chance of continuing to go and probably have a long-term view with these guys, which is great.
Yeah, there's a couple other things from the press conference I want to mention, Mike. First of all, right off the top, Marcus Freeman addressed the South Bend Tribune story that had come out the week before, where he had allegedly or been accused of battery by a high school wrestling coach. Allegedly had like pushed this coach or shoved him or something, and that story came out. Then a video came out in which nothing really went on. It was also a terrible video from like 100 feet away. Notre Dame vociferously defended Marcus Freeman, said that nothing happened. And then like more and more reporting came out basically that this was kind of, not a legit claim. So Marcus Freeman addressed that right off the top. We had recorded something about that last week, and then right after we finished recording, the video came out. So we ended up cutting it, but wanted to take a second just to address that now because holy crap, what a absolute dumpster fire of a situation for this guy who like this wrestling coach who like just awful, just like accusing a really like well-regarded public figure of doing something that he clearly didn't do, thinking he could get away with it, saying in the police report that he knew Marcus Freeman was rich. Don't do that. I mean, it was really bad. And so kind of felt for the Freeman family, especially because his wife was also part of the story, that she was in the South Bend Tribune report. So anyways, I thought that it was interesting that, he opened up with a statement about that and basically defended his family and defended his honor and called out the South Bend Tribune and the reporter for publishing the story without having all of the facts in it. And without, I think most importantly, without waiting to see if the prosecutor's office was going to file charges or not. So do you have any thoughts on what was probably one of the weirdest 2-day news cycles of this already weird off season, Mike?
Well, like Jess, because like you said, like if we go back, like it's all good vibes now around Notre Dame, but that was when there had just been another report that the NFL was still interested in Marcus Freeman. That was before the deluge of portal commits for Notre Dame. Like they were still sitting there with the goose egg in that column. So people were still kind of on edge. And then you had this headline as well thrown on top of that. So it was at a really vulnerable point for the fan base and everybody else. But I like you, like the more and more that came out, the like more and more you're like, oh, this really is nothing other than someone who appeared to want to go and try and capitalize on a situation where they maybe didn't think all this information was going to come out. But I remember talking to my dad after this, and he's just like, honestly, like the level of restraint from Marcus and Joanna is impressive because both my parents obviously, like grew up around us in environments like this. And you saw it. It's one of the big wrestling meets. Vinny's a guy that because of who Marcus is, because of the fact that he's going to wrestle in college, is going to have a target on his back. And to have someone jawing with your kid right there and to see Marcus and his wife try and get Vinny out of there and keep him away from that. My dad's like, it's an impressive level of restraint, specifically from Joanna, because my dad's like, I know your mom, and she would have been frothing at the mouth, ready to light someone up if that had been you guys in that situation.
Yeah, your mom is probably one of the last people I'd ever want to see in a room with someone possibly chirping one of her kids. I mean, I've seen her on Twitter doing it, so can't even imagine being but your parents also know wrestling coaches, right?
Yes.
Like your uncle was a big time wrestler. Did your dad wrestle too?
My dad and Uncle Bob both wrestled at Notre Dame. So like very much like in that community. And so when this first happened, I was just like staring at my dad, like what's happening?
But anyways, I'm glad that he addressed it and like put it in the past and was basically like, don't ask me any more questions about this. Cause it was, like we're putting this behind us, but kind of also felt bad that he had to do all of that because it seemed like absolutely nothing happened here.
No, thankfully, it seems truly like from his standpoint of this, a complete non-issue. The video evidence, the police report, the fact that the St. Joseph's County prosecutor isn't going to do anything, like all leads it back to like, hey, Marcus Freeman was completely in the clear in this situation, which is great. The other situation I wanted to talk about just in putting a bow, because we've had so much of the back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
Can I say I thought Marcus Freeman nailed the USC question. And it was the most emotive that he was during the press conference. Like, you saw the smirk that went across his face when asked about Lincoln Riley and USC's comment on this. And he kind of said, tongue firmly in cheek, I don't listen to a lot of the noise, with that big smile on his face. But in a last refrain where we had seen USC squarely trying to put the blame on Notre Dame, Marcus Freeman came out and said, I'm a competitor. I want to go anytime, anywhere. I love how much he used because he could have used the administration as a meat shield. Mm-hmm. He could have said these decisions are outside of my pay grade. And he said, I obviously want to go do this, but I also have to make the decisions that are best for us. He explained why Notre Dame and the scheduling made sense for them. He said, I completely understand why USC's got to do it for them. And if you want to do it, put the blame on me. That is how you freaking lead. That is how you go out there and handle business and stop trying to push the blame on other people. I thought it was incredible in the face of what we've seen throughout this entire saga.
He also said that he was pretty confident the rivalry would come back, and that was how he led with it. But yes, you're right. He said we had to make decisions, so blame me. He took accountability for something that he didn't really have to take any sort of blame for whatsoever, because the week 0 thing was nonsense to begin with. But I'm with you, Mike. I thought that was great. And he looked so much happier answering questions about Charlie Partridge, about the transfer players, about anything football related than he did about any of the other outside nonsense and noise, the NFL questions, obviously the statement he made at the beginning of the press conference. He just looks like he's ready to go and coach a football team and actually get to watch some football now and coach some football in the spring. So that was also very exciting.
Yes, and the one phrase that seems like it will be on every offseason t-shirt around there in the building, that will be uttered in every breakdown, was leave no doubt. So with that in mind, let's take a quick pause, and coming up next, talk about the group that Marcus Freeman and the staff brought in the portal that is hopefully going to help them leave no doubt in 2026, right back here on the Echoes.
College football not feeling as juicy as it once did? Let me put you onto something that'll shake up your Saturday and every other day of the week.
Because now that Wendy's has crispy chicken tendies and a powerhouse lineup of new sauces, it's time you transfer to the hottest team in the league.
That's right, Team Tendies. Wendy's Tendies. They're making their undeniable rookie season one for the books. Enjoy first-string flavor from some 5-star recruits. Rep your new favorite team everywhere you go, but make sure to cheer with your mouth closed.
Take it to the end zone of savory sauces like honey barbecue, creamy ranch, and the new Wendy's signature sauce to experience a total taste bud blitz of flavor. It's time to join a team that won't upset you with an upset.
Taste the phenom that's gracing the gridiron with its juicy, crispy, and tendery tendencies. Don't fumble the bag. Commit to Team Tendies and call the most delicious plays in the playbook.
All right, huddle up, guys. Tendies on 3. Tendies on 3. 1, 2, 3, Tendies! Let's do this. Wendy's Chicken Tendies, now at participating U.S. Wendy's. Welcome back to the Echoes, at the Echoes ND Pod on all social media. Jess, now we get to kind of put a bow somewhat on this roster. There's still the, I believe, February signing period for Notre Dame, where some of their young players like Teddy Gerard, who are, guys that reclassified that are going to be here in June, kind of got to get over that hump. But in general, Notre Dame's roster has kind of taken shape. We mentioned the 24/7 composite score has overall the rating of your portal roster plus your high school class roster and where it stands. And right now, Notre Dame second, I believe, in that, only to Texas, who picked up a big commitment from that former Auburn wide receiver, Cam Coleman. So understand why that jumped in there. But
he's pretty good.
Notre Dame, impressive portal haul. We talked about all the things there, and we had some names. I think we talked about some of these guys, but it was a little bit more, pencil than pen at that point. But you look at this offseason, the big additions in a lot of people's mind for Notre Dame along the defensive line, where we knew there was a major need, the biggest need of Notre Dame this offseason, that filled with Francis Brew, who is the name that most people talked about going into this, the former Pitt defensive tackle, a guy who Notre Dame played against, and then Tion Gray, the late addition and the Oregon transfer after their loss in the semifinal of the college football playoff. joined by the wide receiver room, the two players from Ohio State, Quincy Porter and Mylan Graham. So as we assess this whole class now, Jess, and kind of put a bow on all this, and you've had time to sit around, read, watch, look at all the things that we've seen come out about these guys. Who has you most excited? Like, which of these portal additions did you look at and expect to see the biggest impact coming up this season or hope for?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest area of need was the defensive line. So I'm going to go with both of these most recent addition D lineman, Francis Brew, who had a pretty productive season for Pitt last year. 7 tackles for loss, 8 havoc plays total in 2025. He was on the freaks list, Mike, which I think we talked about in our first ever Echoes episode, Bruce Feldman's freaks list. And has a couple years remaining in college. And Marcus Freeman said, when I see big people play really hard, that excites me. Not all big people play really hard, but he does. I thought that was a great little bit about what kind of motor this guy has, even though he's not a huge player right there in the interior D-line. But then also the Tion Gray, the Oregon tackle that Notre Dame added. First of all, love that he posted a video in the blizzard that South Bend got 15 inches of snow last week when he was visiting. So perhaps an act from the Chicago Pope to God to snow in Tion Gray on campus last week when he was at Notre Dame. But this guy's really big. He's 6'6", 336. That's his listed height and weight, and played a lot of snaps for Oregon, kind of rotating into their D-line last year. They've got a couple players returning next year, but this was a pretty, no pun intended, pretty sizable get for Notre Dame because he's just like a big run stuffer type guy. And we talked about like one of your things that you wanted to see this team add was a massive ass on the D-line. And I think this is your guy. He's got 3 years of eligibility left and probably would have gotten a lot of playing time next year for Oregon too. So like this is overall between those two, I guess we can start there or you can tell me what your two or favorite is. But I think I feel really good knowing even if Jason Anye does not come back, we still don't know what the status of that is. Notre Dame got some heft inside and not just, okay, like these are big players, but they're not unproven or whatever. Like these are players that actually have a little bit of experience, even though they're not, veteran 1 year, one and done transfer portal players.
Yeah, it is. Notre Dame's defensive line room is like a true variety is the spice of life because there are so many different skill sets inside that room right now. And really, we got to look at this Notre Dame portal class as like retaining Armel Mukam became a thing that was a real, and he was a guy that played limited snaps in that room. You always have to ask yourself the question why, but I think the partridge of it all becomes really interesting for these guys. It's a clean slate. It's a different opportunity. Al Washington's still in the building, but in the linebacker room. So I'm with you, though. Like, Brew is the production. He is similar to the guys that we've had in a bit undersized, but I was texting you, like, reminded me of a bit twitchier Howard Cross, where it's heavy hands, good at getting on edges, plays with good leverage, even despite the size, can still split double teams, and, was productive, like, against Notre Dame. Like, you turn on the tape against the Irish, and there are plenty of plays of him making an impact in this one. But the Tion Gray thing is really interesting. Like, you're right. He is something we have not had a lot of recently, which is just pure size. And we know Notre Dame's defense, like halfway through last season, morphed back into a lot more of what they did last year, where it was bodies around the line of scrimmage, pressure at the quarterback, man-to-man coverage on the outside. But going into the season and in the Miami game early on in the season, like, there was this thought that Chris Ash wanted to do a bit more of the 4-down stuff, 4-down rusher. And that also means you got to be able to stop the run in the box. And this is a guy that comes from a system in Oregon that's different. It is more of the 2-gapping stuff. There were more reps of him as a true nose tackle, as a 3-4 defensive end, where he's just holding up at the point of attack. But I do think having a guy that's got some of that in his skill set that can go be big, to Marcus's point, he's a guy that does play with a really high motor, even in limited reps at times. He plays with great leverage despite being 6'6". Like, again, he played, I think I wrote it down here. It was last year he played 200 plus snaps for Oregon this year. So not a ton. He wasn't a full-time starter, but week 1, I think, of the season. But as a guy that in those reps, like, you saw, all right, what he already shows you. Incredible effort, strong, good hands, just needs a little bit of refinement, like shedding blocks and using his hands in the pass game. That to me is like, okay, now you hand him to a D-line coach that comes in really well regarded, that everyone says is good at this. And I can get excited about what that means for this team this year because he is a different skill set than we've had.
Yeah, just to put the 200, I think it was like 224 snaps or something like that into perspective. That's probably 3 times more than Mookum had last year for Notre Dame. So, like, just from we talked last week about snap counts for D linemen. Like Notre Dame's like 4 of their top 5, not including Anya because we don't know what his status is yet. They're all moving on. So having players that even if they weren't necessarily starters last year, at least be able to come in. And like you said, hopefully like now they have time to develop their skills and they're, continuing to get better year over year. That's a really exciting thing. And so, Marcus Freeman talked about how Charlie Partridge kind of got the deal done with Brew, had recruited him at Pitt. And, that relationship was really important. So I think that's already paying dividends. And, got to give credit to Chris Ash too, for getting Partridge in the door. Cause it sounded like that was, this is really, coaching is a relationships game, which is why sometimes you have really bad coaching staffs because coaches just hire all their friends that maybe, or their sons that aren't that good at their jobs. And then they have, shout out. I was not thinking Brian Ferentz, but you too, Mike. But this is also why coaches can be successful too, because they're able to leverage those connections and like really get some great guys to come and work from them because they're highly recommended via word of mouth. So hopefully like that's, that like little pipeline connection kind of works its way down into the roster and we can see that pay off next year.
I think having people that understand how to work with each other in tight quarters is important, whether that's coaches where Ash and Partridge already have all this relationship, this time under task built up, like you're used to solving problems. I always said that that's the toughest part of any coaching change, of any like roster change is figuring out how do we solve problems when the shit hits the fan. That's why like the spring game, for all the things that I disliked about spring football as a player, like it's important because you get real reps at that. Scrimmages in training camp are important for that reason. And the early part of the season can be difficult. Last year for Notre Dame, those 2 high leverage games, you have to go through how we're going to do this when things really go wrong and you stress test the pipes. And so having that there matters, and having a coach that's got some relationship with a player that's going to be expected the way Brew is to come in and be a productive part of this team is important while the rest of these guys go. And then like how they fit with the rest of the portion of this roster. Like I could still argue that the biggest swing state for Notre Dame going into this season is going to be what happens with Bryce Young. Mm-hmm. Like, I am fascinated to watch what the next step for him is. Do we pack more weight on him and use him more as a 3-tech like we saw in some of the nickel sets last year? Does Partridge come in and unlock that next bit of development that has to happen? But like, that is the point of Notre Dame's roster retention overall, is some of the more, like the portal's great. It's like free agency in the NFL, but the bedrock is still making sure your drafted players go out there and get it done. And like, Notre Dame's got guys in the roster. Boubacar, another year removed from the injury on that defensive front. All those guys taking that next step, because one thing we didn't talk about here is like Keeley, the kid from Alabama. Like, he's a good player, but he's not like your scream off the edge. Oh, that's our one-on-one pass rush winner every time. That's going to have to come from in-house for Notre Dame. So these guys are all important. But again, like, it's important to have that in the proper context as we look at the rest of this roster, and in this case, the D-line.
From a roster management perspective, it seems like, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't read into it too much, but it seems like the staff must be pretty high on Young's potential to, like not have to try to go out there and get someone that probably would replace him, right? Like they kept him, like they obviously wanted to keep him, like he's a legacy, he has tremendous upside. But like I feel like with a few players, it's like, once you get to your sophomore season, it kind of goes either way. It either like doesn't work out for you or it does. And it seems like they're still pretty high on him. And I could name a couple players on offense that I feel the same way, like Cam Williams, for instance. But it seems like, wanting to keep him around, not only that, but I think treating him as an important piece of this defense going into next season probably says that they're still feeling pretty good about him. So yeah, I'm with you on that one. Maybe we're just a year early in our prediction.
He's the body type. I just want to see what he looks like coming off weights this offseason, because then we'll know a lot about how they view his role going into next year. And they kind of had to play with that. He ended up getting taken off the field more. Like, I don't want to devolve too much into that. But again, I do think this is important. The same way with the wide receivers. I think this, we've talked about here, Notre Dame's question and how they shuffle their offensive line and get the best 5 on the field. I think is also going to be fascinating to watch with what they do at wide receiver next year. Because between Jaden Greathouse coming back, hopefully healthy finally, Jordan Faison going all in on football and eschewing lacrosse this spring, combined with, like you said, Cam Williams on the roster, a bunch of the young guys that you're hoping can come in and take the next step, and now two portaled, former highly touted recruits from a place that's developed wide receivers better than any school in the country in the last decade, is fascinating to watch how they're going to mix up that bag and what Mike Denbrock is going to do to try and deploy these skill sets in the best way possible.
Do you want to talk about wide receivers? We have a couple here to talk about. So the big question, I think, was boundary receiver for this team. Like Fields is gone. Obviously, you saw what kind of impact he had for Notre Dame this past year, just being like a huge guy that CJ Carr can chuck it up to. So Notre Dame gets a couple, maybe not exactly the profile you kind of thought they were going to get, not the Malachi Fields 1 year, loner who's going to go to the NFL next year, but they get Quincy Porter, who is he's like the bigger,
he's the big one,
bigger boundary receiver. He's the one that was from Bergen Catholic, which was Steve Angeli's high school. And then Mylan Graham is the one who Tay Johnson grew up with and is friends with. So I don't know, maybe, relationships game there. Maybe Tay helped recruit him to Notre Dame too. So instead of just getting big boundary receiver, they get Porter and Graham, who's more of like a field receiver, I guess. He's 6'1", 195. Both of them have a lot of eligibility left. And both, like you said, they're fighting for spots on a Ohio State offense that has a lot of really talented wide receivers on it. So what do you like about Porter and Graham?
So Porter, starting with that, because that was the most square peg, square hole. Like Notre Dame needed a big guy in the boundary and they got him here. Like he is all of that. I went back and looked because I was fascinated to see like what Ohio State, writers, fans thought of this. And you go back and look, this is a guy that people expected to pop, apparently was a big spring game performer in 2025. And it just didn't wind up, only 6 receptions for 93 yards this past year. But you can see the size. Like he's not an elite separator, I think, by any means, but kind of like what we saw last year from Malachi, like big enough, strong enough to go up there, make contested catches, box guys out, still bends pretty well for his size. There's a lot to like there. And I don't want to disregard that. Watching Mylan Graham, I was like, this might be the one. Like he's fascinating to me because, again, in looking at what Notre Dame got this year that's atypical. Tion Gray, we talked about the size. We don't have a guy on the roster that moves like Mylan Graham. At least not that we've seen. Like maybe Cam Williams, a former 5-star. Like we've got talented guys in the room that we just haven't seen a lot yet. So maybe I should. But in terms of guys who have tape that we can meaningfully take something from, Mylan Graham, you just see a lot of reps where burst off the line, separation at the second level. And again, it's not the most consistent, or else he probably would have played more at Ohio State in that regard. But you just still, even in those limited reps, kind of see that just natural athletic bounce that is really hard to replicate. He was the one I was just excited about because, again, having that in conjunction with what you've already, again, got in the room. Greathouse, who had the massive run in last year's playoff run. Jordan Faison, who's Notre Dame's third down, skeleton key almost every time and is so great after the catch. This guy's a different caliber of athlete than those two, at least with what I saw on tape there. And so that one was pretty tantalizing. Both, have work to do as blockers, which is the dumbest, unsexiest part of this, but it's a big part of being a Notre Dame wide receiver. We've seen our guys do that at an incredibly high level in an offense that I'm still sure, despite losing 2 great backs, is going to have that be a big part of the bedrock of what they do. And so I'm a former lineman. I'm always going to kind of look at that stuff, but it's some pretty special stuff in terms of ability with these guys, at least in the limited sample that I saw. Yeah,
and Porter had a knee injury this year, and not exactly sure what that injury was or what his timeline is for coming back. So not sure when we'll get to see him, but that kind of limited him in 2025 also. And speaking of running backs, Mike, I think Eric Hansen reported that at least one big running back name entered the portal and was kind of sniffing around Notre Dame and was curious. And Notre Dame decided we don't think we're going to take any running backs in the portal this year. So is that something that interests you, that Notre Dame's they got couple wide receivers, they filled in the defensive line, but they were we're good on running back. We're going to stick with what we have. We think we have enough right now with the incoming, enrollees and Kedron Young coming off his injury and Aeneas Williams, of course, being who will probably be the featured back next year.
Yeah, I trust this staff pretty implicitly with a lot of things, but how they manage the running back room is definitely near the top of that list. Like, would it have been cool? Yeah, but it would have been a luxury. And if you had to spend elsewhere at these positions that were of need and everyone knew it, and who knows if the negotiations reflected that or not, we don't get the numbers at the end of all this. But no, I am totally fine with Notre Dame keeping their running back room status quo, especially because, like, the other part of this is, while that is always going to be an important part of what Notre Dame does, the CJ Carr conversation becomes really interesting. Like we mentioned on the last pod, he's already one of the Heisman front runners in terms of odds at sports books. And Marcus also talked about his development, saying last year he was just trying to figure out what to do. And this year, he goes in the film room in this offseason and like him and the quarterback coach are watching cut-ups of Matthew Stafford. Like he's looking to take that next step in developing his game from being a guy that like tons of ability, tons of shit to him in terms of being ready for the big moments, and now going out here and fully unlocking the depth and breadth of the field. Like how you do that, like with Notre Dame, if there's no like clearly defined tight end one, like are you doing more four wideout stuff if you've got a glut of talent in that room? Like there's a lot of really interesting questions about style wise, how the offense is going to deploy themselves. And I think what we saw last year from Mike Denbrock is a reminder that like they will morph to what they've got each given year. Like Notre Dame were masters of the obvious in 2024 with Riley Leonard as a hammer on fourth and short. They platooned personnel packages for different things. And this last year, it was a lot more like, we got guys that can do a lot of things, so we're going to go out there and set it, forget it, kind of let them. And I'm just really interested to see how they go and shuffle the deck this time.
Yeah, that was what I was going to ask you, just to end on that note. Like, weirdly, I feel like the tight end depth will probably be better next year, even though Eli Reardon obviously left. I think Ty Washington still has 1 year left. And then we've got Cooper Flanagan should hopefully be healthy. And the younger Flanagan, unrelated.
Unreal.
So
I mean, the most
I know
shit ever that we've got two
multiple
unrelated
Flanagans. One is a Notre Dame legacy, one is not, spelled differently too. But I think Notre Dame, and of course, incoming tight end that is super. I think we'll probably do a separate episode where we talk about like some of the incoming enrollees and their prolific TikTok dances that they've been posting since move-in day last week, Mike, because that's been my algorithm has just been Notre Dame enrollees doing TikTok dances and heated rivalry fan videos for the last week. So I'm having a good time. But
sad former Notre Dame running back TikToks of Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love, both like doing different versions of I wish someone would have told you these were the glory days while you were still in them. I was emotional watching our running backs show how much love they had for this school and for each other. It was beautiful.
Yeah, actually, that has like really bummed me out over the last few days. Like Jadarian Price has been posting TikToks that have made me a very, very sad person. But anyways, I'm really going to miss those running backs. Like you said, it's going to be a different running backs with, I think, different skill sets next year. And not in a bad way. It's like, oh, they're not going to be as good. But like Aeneas Williams, I think, has a different kind of versatility to his game. And I don't know, maybe Kyron Williams-esque. Maybe we just run the Rams offense next year, which got them to the NFC Championship game. So that wouldn't be too bad. But I really like I like your point about Denbrock being versatile in calling an offense for the personnel that he has, because, coming from LSU when he had Jaden Daniels, who's more of like a dual threat quarterback, and now having CJ Carr and going through that whole quarterback competition and being like, well, which quarterback do you think actually fits Denbrock's game better? Going from Riley Leonard, who is someone who could, put the team on his back and do a little hop for a first down, to CJ Carr, who's a little bit less mobile, but not a statue. And now next year, it's like a whole different thing yet again, different wide receivers, not completely different, but some new faces, different tight ends, different running backs, probably slightly different offensive line, but same quarterback. I think there's a lot of possibilities in front of us next year.
There are the year 2 jump in development of Marcus Freeman, which they also talked about in the presser, of having a quarterback for multiple years as your starter, what that's looked like in the past under Mike Denbrock. You're right, going even back to Cincinnati when Denbrock was there with Coach Freeman when he was coaching defense. Like it is. There's a lot of interest there. Boy, you really took the name right out of my skull when you said Kyron Williams too with Aeneas. Like that was the instant comp that I thought of for a guy that is in a lot of ways similar. So
the Bears game was on 14 hours ago from when we're recording this, so it is still fresh in my mind, both the good and the bad. Mike, it was Cole Kmet catching that touchdown was awesome. Kyron scored, Kyron just is so good. Yeah, I hope he's healthy for the NFC Championship game because it looked like he got a little dinged up. But yeah, there was a lot of Notre Dame talent on display. Even Sam Mustipher got in the end of the Broncos game. Third string center, Mike, had to come in and is now playing in the AFC Championship game. Probably not going to, probably will not have to start that one, hopefully. But it's tough to be the third string center and come into a divisional playoff game.
Nightmare fuel. That being said, Sam's been around this league for a long time and very rolls along the offensive line, and there's a reason that he is still there. It is fun year after year to watch the annual Irish in the NFL good luck in the playoffs graphic grow by leaps and bounds as the school continues to produce a lot of high-level NFL talent, and we hope that all of these young transfer players and the guys currently on our roster are joining them very, very soon after they help Notre Dame win a national championship and put Marcus Freeman's statue on the outside of the stadium. All right, now that we're both fully frothing at the mouth thinking about the possibility of what's to come, job well done by Marcus at the podium there. He's got us juiced up. It is leave no doubt season. But coming up next, we will put a bow on this 2025-26 season and see if there are any larger points that we can use as takeaways for the Irish as they do try and leave no doubt in 2026. All right, as we wrap up here on the Echoes, like we said, we're recording this before the national championship gets played. When this comes out, the college football season of 2025-2026 will be over, done, and dusted. And Jess, it's always kind of the perfect irony that as the season's wrapping up, we always have these boardrooms full of people meeting around the college football playoff national title, trying to decide whatever's going to happen with the future of the sport. And we had more of that down in Miami. It doesn't sound like there's a consensus between 16 teams or 24. That deadline, January 23rd. So if there's no new agreement, no white smoke for the new pope, we'll stick with 12 until December of next year, when apparently that's the date every year of this contract with ESPN in the playoff where they would have to have an answer about the next year's playoff format by, which seems like a really good, healthy, long-term way to govern the sport. But
can I just say, last year, Notre Dame was in the national championship game, so I was like fully locked in all January on the playoff run. As someone whose team's not playing in it this year, it should have ended like 2 weeks ago. Like, this must be what everyone else felt like last year who wasn't an Ohio State or Notre Dame fan. Like, it has dragged on so long. I've seen 2 playoff rounds in the NFL since the last games in college football, and I'm so hyper-focused now on anyone stopping the New England Patriots that I barely have time to think about Indiana and Miami, Mike. So, I mean, if that isn't the first thing that this group of people meeting about the playoff discuss in figuring out whether they're going to expand or not expand, I don't want to hear about it, because I think next year, currently, the championship game scheduled for January 25th. Get the hell out of here with January 25th national championship game. Just stop it.
It's insane. And this is coming from someone who, like, when we played in the BCS title, like, the 40-day layoff in between was a wild, insane experience. And sitting around, especially in the last couple of weeks when you're the only teams that everyone is talking about leading up to that game, is surreal in its own way. So, yeah, there's a lot of things in the calendar that need fixing. And those apparently weren't on the docket for this discussion. Instead, there was a lot of conversation around those changes, but also I thought this was interesting, Jess, especially as it relates to Notre Dame and where we all kind of go from here in terms of the sport. Ross Dellinger did a long article with Dan Radakovich, the Miami athletic director, in the lead up to this, and talked about how the football rosters alone could reach 35 and 40 million without a spending limit around the sport. And it kind of pushed for, hey, we need to get rid of this arbitrary $20.5 million salary cap that they tried to impose and that no one's really gone out here and enforced. And lo and behold, Notre Dame athletic director Pete Bavacqua quoted in this article saying that he believes the cap number is too low. Jess, what'd you make of Pete's insertion into this conversation?
This is the exact kind of conversation where my selfishness and hypocrisy comes out, because if Pete Bavacqua were to say, like, no, we need the salary cap in place because otherwise schools like us can't compete, which is what I'm sure a lot of, like, the non-blue bloods in the sport are saying right now, I'd probably be like, yeah, I mean, it's really unfair. But as someone who's a fan of a team whose athletic director's like, the cap is too low, I'm like, that tells me something. That tells me we got some money, Mike. We got some money. We want to spend it. We want to spend it on some football players, some good football players. I'm kind of kidding here, but also, yeah, the cap thing is everyone knew it was totally arbitrary when the House settlement was settled, and everyone said, well, how is this clearinghouse going to decide what fair market value is for an NIL deal when that is your market value is whatever someone will pay you to do? Like it's totally nonsense. So anyways, I'm not surprised that this is already blowing up. This is what like all the colleges and administrators said they wanted, and now obviously it's not because no one's following it, which everyone knew they wouldn't do. So here we are again with something that everyone saw coming happening.
Well, and it's like you said, it's the usual suspects. Like I said when it happened, if I'm a school that has displayed a willingness to spend above and beyond that number to make the program good, I would have beef with that. And in my mind, and the way college football has always operated, like, again, we always talk about these like outside of the sport proxies. Major League Baseball is a really interesting one in a league that's never had a hard salary or not had a hard salary cap in the modern era of this sport, where teams, if they want to go out here and spend truckloads of money like the Yankees did for years, like the Dodgers are doing right now, you've been allowed to do that. College football's history is richly colored with, while it wasn't directly going to players over the table at the time, programs that had a rich booster get hot at the right time. Mark Cuban in Indiana now being able to go out there and fund the program. Like, that's the whole history of the sport. And so I can understand these guys saying, like, yeah, why would we make that any different? Why would we all of a sudden level set the playing field? Even if, like you said, yeah, I'm sure the teams more in the middle of the pack would love a chance to try and suppress that and give you a chance at an NFL-like level of parity.
Yeah, two things here. First thing, back in the day, it was like, oh, we can't, we're not, like, all the players are amateur, but they are going to take the train from South Bend to Chicago to play in professional football games. But, you know, we don't have social media and no one knows what these guys really look like. So they're probably going to get away with it. That was like how they cheated back then. One of the ways. And then now it's like, okay, yeah, it's an NIL deal, but it's also, you're going to get this amount from your revenue sharing, like whatever. But the other thing, Mike, is like, yeah, of course, 20 million is not enough. Last year, the Ohio State team that beat Notre Dame was supposedly like the most expensive team in college football history. And they were saying that that was a team whose roster cost $20 million. So of course, the number is going to keep going up. And if that was the limit in 2024, it's not going to work in 2025 and 2026, 2027, especially when you hear stories like the one coming out of Duke in Miami right now, where it appears that Duke's quarterback, ACC champion quarterback for the Duke Blue Devils, who's very good, was at Tulane last year, transferred to Duke, got paid a lot of money to go to Duke, is now entering the portal and maybe going to Miami next year, after Miami seemed like they kind of swung and miss on getting Ty Simpson to come out of the NFL draft and stay in college for a year. So if they are spending what is alleged that they are spending, $20 million, probably not going to cut it in college football for a roster.
No. So we'll wait and see what more comes of that, as now that's another, plate spinning in these conversations around the future of the sport that are going out there. But jokes aside, you kind of mentioned it. And if you're a Notre Dame fan, I think you could take solace kind of coming through this whole offseason as the Irish are willing to play ball. This matters to them, and they have acquitted themselves accordingly in how they've gone out here and attacked these problems. And that statement from Pete Bavacqua, as brief as it is another window into the fact that they're not scared to continue to go down that path if that's what it takes to field a competitive football team that can win a championship. And that is the goal, to leave no doubt in 2026 with that in mind. So,
Mike, let's look ahead. Let's say 2026 Notre Dame national champions. I think our Mount Rushmore statue that we put up will be Marcus Freeman, Pete Bavacqua, CJ Carr, Mickey Kidder.
One time for Mickey Kidder. One time, 100% agree. She should be somewhere positioned on the statue with Marcus Freeman outside the stadium if this all comes to pass.
Somewhere the dean of the College of Arts and Letters is like, hey, I'm easy to work with. What are you talking about? I'm not a bad guy. I was very open to this theater credit transferring over to my department.
Hey, listen, you know what? While we know he's happy right now, Connor over at home field, I will pay a king's ransom for a custom-made Mickey Kidder home field shirt for Notre Dame next year. Upon this rock, we build our church. Thank you, as always, to everyone who listens to this podcast. Tell a friend about it. Download, subscribe, rate, review. Check out the YouTube channel at the Echoes ND Pod on all social media. Thanks so much. Go Irish.